Hello and welcome to Freedom Watch, your daily dose of raw liberty online at foxnews.com/freedomwatch. I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano here, defending freedom, defending your natural rights, and defending your right to have a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution. Here on Freedom Watch, we keep track of the struggle, the continuous struggle between the government and individual liberty. You might be tempted to chuckle with approval at stories like the one out of Saudi Arabia recently, in which a young woman beat up one of Saudi Arabia's anti-sex cops, an enforcer for the so-called Commission for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice, who caught the woman kissing her boyfriend and threatened them both with arrest. But is it really so different here in America? The state of Missouri has just enacted a law that would prohibit strip clubs, adult stores, and other sexually oriented businesses from locating within 1,000 feet of schools, libraries, public parks, licensed daycare centers, and houses of worship. That would mean, in practice, just about anywhere in most towns. Sexually oriented businesses would have to close from midnight to 6 a.m. Nudity would be outlawed, and dancers would be kept 6 feet away from customers. The state of Kansas has been considering a similar bill, and its legislature is divided on the issue. One of the bill's strongest proponents has been Philip Cosby, executive director of the Kansas City office of the National Coalition for the Protection of Children and Families. He joins us today, along with an economist who says the free market can decide these issues without regulation by the government. Professor Steve Horwitz of St. Lawrence University joins us as well. Gentlemen, welcome to Freedom Watch.
Thank you.
Philip, first to you. Where in the Constitution is the government authorized to tell me what I can look at, watch, and take delight in the privacy of some building where I'm willing to be there and they're willing to perform for me?
Well, Judge, you probably are well-versed in the argument on the negative secondary effects. For almost 40 years, the courts have upheld that the communities have the right to protect themselves from the toxic fallout of the sex industry.
But where does the community have the right to say to me, you're a law-abiding person, there's no evidence that you're going to commit any crime, but we still won't let you go within 6 feet of the dancer, or you drink alcohol in the presence of the stripper, or you go to a sex club after midnight?
Well, Judge, you are arguing against what the courts have upheld, the common sense cause and effect of the toxic fallout that creates increasing crime, sexually transmitted diseases, property values devaluation, general blight. One of the famous examples was New York City and Times Square, as we saw that they finally regulated that businesses, dispersed it, and tourism increased and crime decreased. This is common sense, and the courts have upheld it, and we celebrate what Missouri has done. Parents cannot contend on their own. These small towns located along the interstate that are ambushed by these strip clubs and porn industry, they are outgunned in an industry that says they have $15 billion a year in annual income.
All right,
more than all professional sports put together.
Do I have the right to view pornography in the privacy of my own home? Clearly, you wouldn't dispute that.
It has to do with secondary effects, Judge, and
you don't
know
want to answer the constitutional question. Here's the constitutional question. What right does the government have?
It has been upheld. Time, place, and manner restrictions are constitutional.
What right does the government have to exercise its judgment over mine or yours and tell us what we can view in private? If you and I are not the type of people who would go out and commit crime as a result of what we view.
The core purpose of good government is public safety. The toxic fallout of the sexualized culture is evident. Nightly, we will see your news tell us of the next predator, the next rapist, those sex crimes that continue. Either you're just selling papers, or this is the reality we live in as we see the sexualization of the culture and the fallout.
You don't want to address the free market or the freedom of choice argument.
It's negative secondary effects, Judge.
Got it. In your view, because some people who view pornography might go out and commit crime, nobody should be able to view it. Professor Horwitz, you don't accept that, do you?
Almost for 40 years, the courts have upheld the negative effects of sexualized businesses.
Got it. Professor
that's
Horwitz,
the reality,
you don't accept
Judge,
that
and you know
argument,
that.
do you?
not be selling kitchenware because people can take forks and knives and go out and do all kinds of secondary effects with them. The bottom line here is, as the judge said, the First Amendment's pretty clear. Congress shall make no law. And what individuals wish to consume in the privacy of their own home, by whatever that might be, as long as they're not harming anyone, is that they're not a threat to public safety directly, then there's no business of the government involved.
I think Mr.
There you go.
I think
Threat
Mr.
to
Cosby
public
assumes,
safety.
hang on, Philip. I think Mr. Cosby assumes, Professor, that anyone who observes pornography is more inclined to go out and commit a crime, and therefore their First Amendment right to look at whatever they want should be interfered with by the government on the chance that as a result of looking at it, they might commit a crime.
Then we got to stop selling all kinds of things and start arresting all kinds of people. Anyone who watches any kind of movie with violence in it, by his logic, might go out and be more likely to commit a crime. Are we going to start censoring movies that people watch? Are we going to start arresting people looking in their homes? Oh, you watched a violent movie. You might be more likely to go out and commit a crime. We're going to arrest them. We're going to shut down the movie production. This is.
You know, we're talking about Missouri as far as what they did. We're talking about brick and mortar businesses, the sex clubs that are. We're not talking about privacy of home, so don't switch it here.
So
we're talking about the cumulative effect.
Isn't the next step, Philip, the privacy of the home? Because if your argument is correct, I dispute it, but a lot of people agree with you. If your argument is correct that the secondary effect, the likelihood of someone to commit a crime because they've been aroused sexually is so dangerous that their right to look at what will arouse them sexually should be interfered with, shouldn't it be interfered with in the privacy of their home as well as in a business, Philip?
You better take away my you better take away my wife's negligee then, right? Because I might get aroused by looking at
You're
that.
going to switch.
Ahead,
You're going to switch the argument then.
Well,
you want to talk about obscenity. You want to talk about obscenity, that's a different subject. But if you want to talk about negative secondary effects of the sex business on communities, that's a different subject. Now, which do you want to talk about?
Well,
obscenity crime?
hang on. I suppose if your argument is true, then there is no limit to what the government can stop. For example, there is a way to stop automobile accidents. Ban cars. As Professor Horwitz has said, there's a way to stop stabbings. Ban knives, even those that are used for legitimate purposes. At what point will your secondary effect stop and privacy and personal choice take over, Philip? Or is there no such point?
Okay, you're switching gears from what Missouri and Kansas did. So you want to talk about obscenity crimes. Now, 1973 United States Miller decision upheld that obscenity is illegal. It is not protected free speech. Never has been by the courts. It was not the original intent of our founding fathers
but what's
to
obscenity
protect,
for you in Missouri
obscenity.
might be standard for me in Times Square, New York.
There you go. Community standard trial, Judge. Now you're talking about a different thing. If you want to talk about obscenity crimes, we can talk about that. And the courts have spoken on that as well.
But if you want to talk about secondary effects, you need to answer another question. If the same logic holds true for violence, are you willing to start shutting down the local Cineplex because they're showing a movie that has violence in it that might lead someone to that? Are you willing to shut down the local Williams-Sonoma again because they sell knives?
Go ahead, Philip.
Well, we will talk about obscenity crimes then. The courts have upheld
you don't
that
have an answer
obscenity
for
is
the
not
other
protected
Philip,
free
I think Professor Horwitz has asked a very good question that you don't want to answer. Hang on, Philip.
I'm going to answer it.
If your goal is to stop what you call secondary effect, people committing crime because of what they observe, would you justify stopping movies that show violence? Would you justify removing art from museums that shows nudity or even pornography?
The courts have allowed what is called community standards.
Do you have anything other than a memorized answer for these questions, Philip?
Judge, this is the answer. If you don't want to hear it, turn me off. But here it is.
No, I don't want to turn you off. I want to find out is there any point beyond which you won't go, or will you justify all Victorian wiping out of whatever anybody wants to see because it doesn't please your version of society?
How far are you willing to go to save us from ourselves, right?
Okay, Judge. If you want to just go to the extreme and say everything goes, there are no limits. Bestiality, child pornography, just let it fly.
Someone, we're talking about
no one's talking about that. But the other extreme, the extreme that you argue, Philip, the extreme that you argue.
Did I go someplace that you don't want to talk about? Where is the line?
The extreme
Everybody has a line.
The extreme that you argue, Philip, would cleanse us of anything that you think is pornographic or anything that you think would cause a secondary effect. And that would interfere with natural rights, and that would interfere with privacy.
And not to mention free
the courts
enterprise.
allow community standard trial. Every community has the right, be it San Francisco or Abilene, Kansas, they can go into the pornography outlets, pull the evidence off the shelf, put it in the crucible of the courtroom, and if that community says that is obscene, the First Amendment protection of erotic speech is lifted, and it is illegal. And most states in the United States have that law. Even the Supreme Court has upheld that. Obscenity is illegal, and every community has the right to address it.
And you don't want to talk about whether or not it can still be legal in a person's home, do you, Philip?
No, nor do we have we're having the conversation about exactly where he thinks the line on obscenity would be, which may well be extraordinarily different from where most communities